Thank you so much, Ira. Welcome everyone to the Resilience Hub Day. It is a pleasure for me to introduce you to...
Give it 1 second just so people can come in. Sorry, David.
Perfect. Yeah, now I see them. Okay, perfect. I see people are still joining the call. We will start now to stay on time. But thank you everyone for being here today. It is a pleasure for me to introduce you to this Resilience Hub Day, where we will amplify local voices in the run-up to COP28. I am David Gonzalez, a policy officer at Global Resilience Partnership, and I will begin by introducing first the regional resilience hubs, which will be presenting today some of their main key findings that they've identified throughout the year in the run-up to COP as part of the engagements that they've been running throughout this year. Throughout the year, the regional resilience hubs have been working in engaging across different spaces, such as the spaces connected directly to COP28, for example, workshops related to working on how to effectively engage at COP28, how to amplify local voices and what does this mean in global policy spaces, roundtables related to addressing climate change, or sessions related to loss and damage, and and other thematic elements. Also engaging at global spaces such as the World Water Week, or or other sessions such as Andes Resilientes in the case of Latin America, CBA 17, and the Resilience Evidence Forum, among many other engagements that have taken place throughout the year. Some of the key strategies for effective engagement that have been run throughout the year by the regional resilience hubs include building capacities of stakeholders to effectively engage in policy spaces, such as the Conference of Parties, creating dialogue spaces where resilience and adaptation actions can be shared, as well as their obstacles and enablers, communicating messages from those on the front line and engagement through networks, actively participating in the programming of the Resilience Hub that will be taking place at COP28 in the Blue Zone as a pavilion, opening up opportunities for dialogue and stakeholder engagement throughout the next 2 weeks, and preparing key sessions as part of the Resilience Hub programming. There has been a lot of efforts throughout the last months trying to create these opportunities for engagement, create these spaces for conversation, and amplify local voices in the global policy space. And within this session today, we will focus on highlighting some of the main key messages that emerge from these regional hubs. We will, as I did, we will introduce the Resilience Hub at COP28 as well. We will highlight some of the main messages emerging from regional resilience hubs. We will provide space for local stakeholders and grassroots organizations to share some insights in relation to discussions taking place at COP. And we will engage knowledge brokers such as the high-level champions to promote the messages as part of COP28 discussions. So I will stop there with this brief introduction, and I would like to open up the space now. We will go regional hub by regional hub, creating the space for some highlights and some key messages emerging from the engagements that each of the regional hubs had throughout this year. I would like to begin then with the Latin America and the Caribbean regional hub and give now the floor to Maria Gracia, I believe, who will step in now for the LAC regional hub. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. hello to everyone, and thank you for this. So yeah, I'll talk a bit about the process we've been following for Latin America and the Caribbean region for the Regional Resilience Hub. Just to give you a bit of context, Avina was leading the Regional Resilience Hub since last year for COP27. And maybe we can go into the next slide, please. So last year we worked on generating 7 open virtual dialogues on specific themes that were prioritized for the region. And of course, all of these conversations produce key messages to take to COP27. But it was interesting to find when we kind of review all of these messages that there were common concerns in all of the topics we were discussing. And based on those common concerns, we prioritized 2 of them that kept coming up. And the first one was the democratization of narrative development and decision-making spaces. And the second was accessing climate finance. And so based on this, we've started working during this year towards COP28, focused on these 2 messages. And so what we did this year was to develop discussions within regional spaces and regional networks that already exist to continue this discussion based on these 2 themes. And we're showing here some of the events we participated in. So, for example, we were at the regional Let's LAC event in August. In October, we were part of the LAC Pavilion at the Adaptation Future Conference, as well as having a space at the LAC Climate Week. And have also been developing some webinars focused on how to effectively engage at COP specifically for new, upcoming, and local voices. So this is kind of the process we've been leading, and going a bit about what we've learned this year through the process. Of course, there's a lot of things we have learned, but I've tried to summarize some of the main points. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So the first was that in terms of the democratization of narrative development and decision-making spaces, we've had several conversations with different stakeholders in the region, as well as we've been developing a study to look towards the need and opportunities that we need to make participation more effective in the LAC region. And we've seen that even although there's been a good development, the spaces of power are still mostly occupied by men, and men especially from the global north. So many of the participants from the region that are very few who are reaching these decision-making spaces. And this is observed among many groups, including, for example, non-governmental representatives, indigenous communities, right? And we've come across that this lack of participation or this lack of representation respond to crucial barriers that need to be addressed. So, for example, resources to work from a bottom-up approach. Being in those global spaces, participation means putting together spaces at a local level, at a national level first, and that takes time and resources are not readily available. Of course, capacity building, David mentioned it, this is crucial for it, as well as better coordination among similar groups that can create narratives together, and access to information, specifically talking about language, because in the majority, although not all, of Latin America and the Caribbean, English is not the first language. And even for a lot of local communities and indigenous communities, they may speak other languages. So information and being able to participate in those spaces, kind of language becomes a barrier. As well as other local limitations. So, for example, we cannot always assume a good access to internet to connection. So we've been working, and I'm passing through all of these topics, but I would say something else that we've been discussing and that has been kind of a lesson learned through this is that we have to understand that those working in global spaces, it's important for them to reach out and to share the knowledge and the capacity building towards local leaders. But also we need to understand that global spaces need to adapt to new forms of working and to new forms of knowledge to be able also to incorporate those local leaders. And that we have to understand this has to be a two-way street or a two-way process of learning, not only from top down, but also from bottom up. And can we go to the next slide, please? So the second issue I mentioned was kind of access to climate finance. And this is also, again, something that comes up in every space and every topic we're talking about. And that's because, adaptation is clearly a priority in the LAC region. There's been a lot of work in identifying adaptation measures, but we need to strengthen the process of first assessing and costing regional financial needs, because without this information, it's impossible to move forward towards implementation. Also that, climate finance, especially for adaptation, while it's important, it focuses on the adaptation outcome itself. We need to seek to have a broader perspective on how we seek to protect lives, territories, and livelihoods of local communities and have a broader development understanding of this process. We also have to understand that accessing finance means also kind of managing a lot of barriers from traditional processes that are often time-consuming, involve, accessing robust climate data and having technical capacities that are not always possible at a local level. And so these limit a lot of that access for finance for local communities. And, many of these communities are the ones that are closer to adaptation and that have the solution, but that connection is still missing. So just to wrap up, because I know there's someone else that will be joining us from the LAC region to talk a bit more, is that we need to make sure that both these points, the democratization of global spaces and the access to finance, have to happen. We have to work towards happening now, so that we allow for an inclusive and urgent adaptation in the Latin America and Caribbean region. So yeah, thank you, David. I understand that, I don't know, Pascal, if the other person...
Paulo just joined. Paulo,
okay.
Can you hear us?
Yes, Paulo.
Hola, hola, Paulo.
Paulo, no te escuchamos.
O será Natalia, tal vez.
Yeah, I don't know. We were supposed to be connected. I'm sorry.
No, it's not a problem. We can also continue if you want, and we can confirm that their audio works, if that's okay.
Yes, maybe we can come back to them later if it's possible.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Maria Gracia. Thank you so much for these great findings. I think these are issues that we definitely need to consider as we move up towards COP, not only COP28, but also in these global policy spaces ahead, as we want to build adaptation and resilience as the next stages for engagement for grassroots organizations and local actors. Thanks so much, Maria Gracia. We will now move then to identify some of the key messages from the South Asia Regional Hub. Fatin, do you want to start with this? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, David, for providing me the floor. Hello, everyone. My name is Fatin Fateh. I am the Program Assistant in Collaboration Program at the International Center for Climate Change and Development. And ICAD is spearheading the South Asia Regional Hub event this year. And like last year, success on the building upon the last year's success, this year we organized a 7-day thematic virtual event to amplify the voices of local organizations and showcase the South Asia regional perspectives. So this year we will have the 38 organizations working with local communities across South Asia participated in 23 sessions in the event, sharing resilience stories and their work with the community. David, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So these are the organization, and these were the theme focused on in the South Asia region this year. And this the 7-day thematic session was actually focused on these 7 individual themes. Can we go to the next slide, please? South Asia countries like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka are facing tremendous climate change impacts, while these developing nations play only a relatively small role in causing climate change. In Nepal is now like dealing with severe impacts, including landslide, glacier melting with Himalayas from the Himalayas. Bhutan, Pakistan, Bangladesh are facing severe flooding, drought, water scarcity, sea level rise, cyclone, and of course we cannot condone the including heat waves this year, which is kind of a clear indication that we are set to exceed the Paris Agreement goal to keep the global temperature rise below the 1.5 degrees Celsius. So the South Asia local communities, despite facing these immense challenges and disasters, they are at the forefront of resilience and adaptation effort. There are lots of resilience stories and adaptation measures we have learned throughout the year, like throughout the virtual event, like participants from different countries of South Asia share their resilience stories and adaptation measure. This includes using flood resilient measurement tools, early warning system, capacity building for women, climate resilient agriculture, vermicomposting, including indigenous knowledge, millet cultivation, bamboo planting for mangrove restoration, rainwater harvesting, and many more. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So finance is essential for adaptation to climate change. There are many adaptation measures that can be taken, but these measures require sufficient funding. A report has shown that every $1 investment invested in prevention can save $5 in losses. But the Green Climate Fund has a policy of allocating 50% of its funding to mitigation and mitigation projects and 50% to adaptation projects. However, it was highlighted in one of the sessions that in practice, a larger proportion of the fund's money has been allocated to mitigation projects, with adaptation projects receiving only about 20%. This lack of funding for adaptation is causing increasing loss and damage. Also, the funding needs to be indulged toward public domain, not only the big corporations. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So these are the key messages emerged from this year in South Asia Regional Resilience Hub discussion. So the first message is clear that adaptation measures needs to be replicated in different parts of the region to meet the global goal on adaptation. When communities have a voice in decision making, they are more likely to hold government agencies and other stakeholders accountable for delivering on their commitments. So their voices need to be included in decision making. The second message is like lack of funding, in particularly acute in developing countries where communities are already struggling with poverty and inequality. As a result, these communities are disproportionately affected by the impacts of climate change, suffering both economic loss and damages, despite having contributed the least to global greenhouse gas emissions. So operationalizing loss and damage fund is crucial. The other point is the South Asia Regional Hub emphasized the significance of youth initiatives this year in climate change adaptation. They should be encouraged to participate in decision-making processes. Despite being a crucial factor in resilience, many young people migrating in search of a low-level opportunities these days. So they should be encouraged and introduced to the latest technologies to foster their entrepreneurial spirit and encourage them to develop groundbreaking solutions. Women play a pivotal role in both experiencing and addressing the impacts of climate change. Their knowledge, insights, and leadership are indispensable in building resilience and crafting the effective solution. Recognizing these significant contributions, we must prioritize empowering women to take on decision-making roles and actively shape climate change responses. So this was from me. David, do you wanna jump here, or can I invite my next speaker?
Please invite your next speakers. Thanks, Fatin.
Okay, thanks, David. So now I would like to invite Sophie DeConnick, the Global Climate Facility Manager from UNCDF Local, to highlight the importance of community-based work on adaptation in South Asia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Fatin. Thank you, David, and everyone for the opportunity to be here with you today. So I've been asked to highlight one key message on the importance of community-based work on adaptation and to report back on a number of best practices or strategies that can help ensure local voices are indeed amplified and included in decision-making. So we've held a session at the South Asia Regional Resilience Hub. We had participants from countries like Bangladesh, which is indeed a champion in this field, but also Bhutan, Nepal, and other countries. And we also held, repeated events hosted at Gobeshona. And we see one key message that is repeated over and over from stakeholders and from various types of stakeholders, which I think make it more powerful, is that, and sorry for stating the obvious in a way, but that adaptation must be locally led. I mean, now it may seem obvious, but when those principles were launched a few years ago, it wasn't. And so I won't, repeat them. We know them, or we can research them, but that's obviously a very good, clear framework on what constitutes adaptation that is, locally led, and what it means, and also how somehow it has made adaptation also more inclusive, because I think it's creating bridges between, community-based adaptation, but also other local actors that can also contribute to such adaptation. So that's a common message that we're hearing across the region. That I just would like to flag. It cannot be overstated in a way, because it's only, I think, since the Paris Agreement that dimension was more visible in the agreement. And we also still see, talking back to the issue of finance, that climate finance, of course, is falling short. It's falling short on adaptation, and it's also falling short when it comes to local climate finance. So that's a first point. When it comes to the best practices or strategies, there are 5 that I would like to flag. And sorry, I don't have slides, but I'm happy to send that in writing afterwards. First one is the importance to work with existing local institutions, local actors, but also linking to national systems. So we see that experience across South Asia, communities, subnational, national governments coming together, so that the work and the good practices that can be tested or documented in certain areas can actually be brought to scale through the use of national systems. And really leading to those change that can be lasting and reach an increasing number of people. So that is one first, best practice. A second one relates to the need to support communities with localized climate data to complement traditional knowledge. So traditional knowledge is essential, but it's also very important that, projections of risk, hazards, vulnerabilities, exposure come in a format that is usable for local risk decision making. We see localized climate risk indexes being developed in countries like Bangladesh, and such assessments are really important to further support communities. A third one relates to capacity building or institutional strengthening, perhaps I should say, of local actors. I mentioned communities, but we also see in the region a lot of work being done with local governments. There is, a lot of experience in various countries. Bangladesh is one of them, but countries like Bhutan also have been for long using the channel of decentralization and local governments to actually send funding down to the community level for what we might call now locally led adaptation. A fourth one would be the importance to also embed the traditional knowledge I mentioned, but also, sustainable natural resource management or even nature-based solution, so that those solutions can complement perhaps those more technical one at times, and be really well suited to the local context. And a fifth one would be the value of exchanging and sharing. Of course, we see that throughout the work of the Resilience Hub and the regional ones, but that's really something that we see in terms of learning between within countries, between local actors, but also across countries. And so that's something we're quite keen to also continue supporting. Just to say that, if I may just add, we also see this level of support up to the the highest level of government, this importance of financing locally led adaptation, and that's one area of work that UNCDF with this initiative I work on is mentioned. So at COP there will be some more events and ministerial declaration to call for this kind of simplified, consistent access to finance for locally led adaptation. Happy to share more. Thank you so much for the opportunity once again.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Fatin, would you like to introduce the next speaker?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Sophie, for that. So now I would like to invite Ms. Farah Kabi, the country director of ActionAid Bangladesh. She will be highlighting the importance of mobilizing climate finance in adaptation. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I audible? Okay.
Yes.
So I think we can't overemphasize how important strategic finance and how it can transform existing structures, redistribute power, relationship among the local actors. And in South Asia, the messages have come through very strongly also. And on my previous speakers have all talked about adaptation and all the initiatives that are being taken at the local level. But I just want to highlight that along with the adaptation fund, we need to look at loss and damage and how it should now be agreed at COP28. No more going back and forth, no dragging your feet, and it's really crucial because if we are seeing ourselves and all the communities that we engage with, the young people, the children, that they're already vulnerable and suffering. So we want the loss and damage fund to be up and running the ASAP, and the objective should be that the loss and damage fund should focus on addressing the irreversible and unavoidable impacts of climate change on vulnerable communities. Now, an example of that would be children. If you are repeatedly having disasters, children are losing out on school. So the year after year, or a young girl is being married off, how are you going to give back her childhood? How are you going to give them back that time? So we want to see that the loss is addressed immediately, and the loss and damage fund should be distinct, and it should have new and additional funding. It's the mitigation funding or the adaptation funding should not be carved. A piece of it should not be carved for the loss and damage funding. So I think we need to provide grants-based finances, mobilize new and additional finances, and the sources need to be distinct and agreed. It's high time that it involves innovative financing mechanism, and we definitely want to see developed countries agreeing and making that contribution. The loss and damage fund should have a separate governance structure and administrative processes. And we know the technical committee could not decide in 4 of its meetings. So the TC had the 5th meeting, and they are opting out for the World Bank to manage this fund. The youth, the young people, the local communities, the civil society, we still have a huge concern about this. And we want to make sure that the conditions that have been put forward to the World Bank are really upheld. There's transparency, accountability. There is engagement of the very communities who are being impacted. And there is gender justice in the allocation, in the distribution of this fund. The most important thing is this fund should be accessible, flexible, and it should not go through huge bureaucratic processes in the name of compliance or for the sake of, financial governance and management. We are not asking for any compromise there, but it should be supportive, it should be accessible, and institutions and structures need to be created. Then the fund and the board should support that. So from our side, it was very clear. Even yesterday, we were talking to the young people. We are all preparing for COP28, that we want to see the loss and damage fund agreed and running ASAP. We don't want to get into any more conversations or any country withdrawing from it. We really want to see their commitment and mobilize the new and additional funding. I'll stop here. If there are questions, or I can add later.
Thank you very much, Farah. Fatin, would you like to introduce your slides?
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, ma'am, for that. So moving on to the next, our next speaker. So we have Mohammad Fahim Hussain with us. I would like to invite Fahim, who is the founder of Green Lead. He's a CAD fellow as well. He will be highlighting the importance of youth initiatives and how can we empower local voices to highlight their role as agents of change to build with them. For Fahim, over to you.
Thank you, Fatin, for the floor. So hello, everyone. I am Fahim Hussain, an ICAD Youth Fellow and founder of Green Lead. Green Lead is a youth-led social enterprise dedicated to climate action in the Global South. If I look back to my journey, I was born in a riverside village in Bangladesh and can remember my community affected by the adversity of climate change. But I was lucky enough to be able to move to the capital of the country and get the best education. When I wanted to understand the climate change landscape, I saw a clear gap in the traditional education system. I realized education is the first step to preparing the youth as an agent of change to build climate resilience. I started making visually attractive social media content for youth. During COVID, we leveraged the power of social media to reach more than 100,000 of youth and help them understand their role in this fight. We knew that we needed active participation along with education to mobilize youth. Since 2020, we have taken several initiatives to turn knowledge into action. A few months ago, we organized a case solving where we invited youths from all the hill tracts and indigenous community to discuss specific climate-induced challenges. The day-long event concluded with youths presenting their observations and possible solutions to the problem. But the real impact came out later, when the region faced a sudden flood, and the participants of this climate case were at the front line in helping the flood-affected community. We all know we cannot do it alone. Throughout my experience as a youth representative and interacting with thousands of youths across Asia, I realized youth need to build their capacity and they need enough funds and support for their climate initiatives. Based on this realization at Green Lead, we're building a global platform for climate action. We invite youth leaders to co-create climate intervention in their own community and showcase it on our digital platform. Then we aim to connect them with climate conscious brands and individuals for supporting the local climate interventions. I personally believe local voices are the heartbeat of resilience because they intimately understand the challenges they face and hold the keys to innovative solutions. Our role is to empower these voices, including youth, to provide the tools and knowledge necessary for communities to become architects of their own resilience. A few months ago, I asked Professor Dr. Salimul Haq, how do we keep hope as a youth in this challenging time? He emphasized on the importance of solidarity and working together in this common fight. I would urge all of you here to give the space to youth and try seeing the world through the youth lens, because it's our future that is at stake. And we want to do every possible thing to build resilience in our community. Let us stand together, recognizing the strength in our diversity and empower the local voices to build the resilience our world desperately needs at this moment. It's time to celebrate the youth as architects of change for a resilient tomorrow. Thank you so much for the privilege of, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. I look forward to COP28 and the contribution of this resilience hub at the front line. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fahim. Thank you, Fatin, Farah, Fahim, Sophie, for this great synthesis of key messages from the South Asian region. I think they're very relevant, and I take this last message from Fahim in the sense of the need to build solidarity and other sustainability-aligned values, as well as sufficiency and long-term perspective as well in the build-up to the future and building adaptation and resilience for all in a just way. Thank you very much. And now we'll open up the space to hear some of the key messages from the Africa region. Thank you so much for this. Please, Batismo, I give you the floor to take over this part of the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, evening, morning to you all. My name is Padzimo Raman, and I'm a program manager at South North, which itself is a managing partner of the Resilience Hub and also leading on the Africa Regional Resilience Hub together with Slum Dwellers International, SDI. I'm joined by colleagues on this call from SDI, as well as my colleague Emil from South North. So the Africa Hub, next slide, please, David. The Africa Hub has continued its focus across the 4 key themes that emerged from the COP27 Resilience Hub, namely locally led adaptation, finance and investment, food and agriculture, cities and urbanization, and building on these messages and providing new perspectives and insights. So before going into the messages, I'd like to briefly mention our approach this year, which has really been more of a people and individual-centered approach, not necessarily focusing very much on hosting of events, but more creating a platform for amplification of thought leadership on the continent, placing people and action at the heart of the climate change narrative, and ensuring an authenticity and relevance. The Hub actively sought inputs from African, national, local, and thematic experts, with inputs and contributions from over 20 individuals across various institutions and programs, and drawing on the expertise and knowledge of these African voices. The resulting content, including the illustrations that I will be showcasing today, is credited to these individuals, and this approach in developing the illustrations has also embraced a human and action-oriented central theme, elements of which you will also see throughout each of the illustrative pieces. These also have been inspired by African storytelling and art. And yeah, so with that, I have the privilege of sharing with you today, not just some of the key messages from the Africa Regional Hub, but some of the key experiences and lessons of partners and programs that could carry through to informing and shaping the deliberations at COP28. These thought leadership pieces are accessible online via the SSN and Resilience Hub websites. Next slide, please, David. So in terms of locally led adaptation, the Africa Regional Hub reiterates that urgent adaptation at the local level is critical, not only in response to the future projected changes and risks, but also in addressing the losses and damages that are already negatively impacting the continent. Economic loss and damage alone has been estimated at between 447 to 894 billion US dollars per year by 2030 for developing countries. So the loss and damage fund must cover both economic and non-economic impacts resulting from rapid and slow onset events. And importantly, this should be made available to developing countries in a timely manner without being overly burdensome and through non-debt generating instruments that are accessible to people at the local level. So streamlining processes and fostering flexibility to support access to climate finance at the local level can enable climate resilience, adaptation, and recovery. And these should be key considerations that, are as part of the deliberations at COP28. Of course, culture and indigenous knowledge in Africa holds very valuable climate resilient practices that have been developed over centuries and tied to local ecosystems. So developing holistic strategies that actually blend scientific and local and indigenous knowledge systems, this can help to effectively shape effective climate action. Next slide, please. So in terms of gender equality and social inclusion, this is central in defining adaptation and resilience approaches. And this is a priority that must show through at COP28. GESI and climate action needs to be integrated effectively together at both policy and practice level. And through the agenda call to action, which is linked here, and my colleague Emil will put the link in the chat box now as well. Through this gender call to action, which kind of calls a broader set of stakeholders beyond just women's groups, to ensure that women, vulnerable and marginalized groups are explicitly engaged and included in leadership of climate action as a matter of enhancing resilience. And so the call to action is to the stakeholders, including research funders that are mentioned in this beautiful illustration. Next slide, please.
Sorry, let me go back to the slides.
Sure, thank you. It's the image. Yep, next slide. So this editorial illustration relates to a thought piece that's been published, and it's on the implications of perceived and actual risks that are often associated with climate investments, particularly in Africa, noting that with the right policy and financial instruments, we do have the power to unlock finance for a sustainable and climate resilient future. Next slide, please. So Africa does hold the key to unlocking climate finance, and we have the tools, but managing actual and perceived risk is half the battle. For this, a multifaceted approach is crucial, including things like de-risking investments through public finance, fostering conducive environments for private sector investment, and also one significant gap that needs to be, that needs immediate attention is the need for more risk-tolerant capital to support early-stage project development. So as the Africa Regional Hub, we reiterate the call on increased finance in areas that are deemed priority by developing countries, and especially African countries, in particular adaptation and loss and damage. And considering that the continent, requires 86 billion per annum by 2030, new and additional sources of finance for climate adaptation and resilience are now urgent. Next slide, please. Just to mention, though, that, we can scale up finance, but it's the quality of finance and not just the quantity. So for climate finance to be effective, it must be flexible and responsive to the needs of those that need it the most. So transformative climate finance is pivotal to empowering transformative climate action at the local level. And insights from the Adaptation Research Alliance, ARA, which is a program, highlights the benefits in creating an environment for local inclusion in shaping research. But the insights from that program could also help in informing the design of financing initiatives. So this includes being community-led first and foremost, tapping into diverse knowledge holders, including Indigenous people, women, and marginalized groups, and building the capacity, importantly, of not just the grantees, but the funders as well. So funders need to understand how to deliver the finance more effectively, including making the structural kind of changes to contractual processes, providing pre-financing for early stage project development, and also reducing some of the burdensome administrative processes. Next slide, please. In terms of food and agriculture, the image here just depicts the fact that there is a pathway to sustainable agriculture for Africa, with key enablers, that are required along the way. Next slide, please. So in terms of, again, food and agriculture, so climate change presents a duality in terms of both challenges and opportunities for agriculture, for food systems, for food security on the continent. And harnessing its potential really requires, or harnessing the opportunities requires diversifying the opportunities and building agricultural processing value chains, tapping into local context, local markets, with an understanding of the local context, and harnessing the continent's youthful population to grow the sector. So the pathway to sustainable African agriculture entails that there is support, financial, technical support for collaborative efforts in agricultural research and technology, piloting business models that prioritize job creation for women and youth, support for research that develops technologies that not only reduce emissions, but also enhance productivity, and also, widespread support for adoption of widespread technology, including access to finance for extension services and education on sustainable agriculture. So COP28 decisions under the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work on implementation on agriculture and food security must include decisions on progress towards the realization of dedicated support for these aspects that are mentioned here. Again, ensuring climate finance, including adaptation and loss and damage, is considered in ways that it can really be directed to farmers, communities, etc., to advance sustainable agricultural practices. Next slide, please. Lastly, in terms of cities and urbanization, the impacts of climate change will have significant impacts on the future of African cities, noting that of the 100 fastest growing cities in the world, 79 are in Africa. And the provision of services is and will continue to be compromised by climate change. So investment in climate resilient infrastructure is fundamental to building economic and socioeconomic resilience in the context of Africa's rapidly growing cities and urban landscapes. And really, it's a matter of justice, where countries are experiencing significantly extreme heat events as well. This becomes an issue of justice. COP28 should demonstrate commitments to effectively delivering on support for increasing development of climate resilient infrastructure for urban and rural infrastructure. And I'll leave it there and hand over to Ms. Alice Peary, who will also add to the reflections from the Africa Regional Hub. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much, Fatismo. Alice, please go ahead. I will ask you to please keep it a bit short to make sure that we have space for all the panelists. Thanks so much, Alice.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Alice Peary. I'm a federation member, Zambia Homeless and Poor People's Federation, in partnership with People's Process on Housing and Poverty in Zambia and SDI. I'm coming from Kanyama's community, which is Islam and planned settlement. And we are a group of grassroots women, youths, and men who have been in the community for long. And these communities where we are, always we face a lot of challenges being unplanned settlements, more like floods, sanitation, water and sanitation, and also lack of enough food for us. And I'm here to just share a bit of VCA program, what it has done in our community and in other areas, especially in Kanyama, what we've done towards VCA program. What we've done, we started with data collection within our communities. And when we collect this data, we do a mapping within our community to know the places which are more affected and where we are having a lot of challenges. And after collecting this data, we put the data together. The reason why we collect this data is to see that we know the places which are affected and we know where we should start from. Automatically, with this data which we get, it makes us have a voice to see how we can be organized and also manage to invite other stakeholders, the government, and other partners to come on board to understand our issue, because this issue of being marginalized is within us, and nothing for us without us. So as the grassroots women in our community through VCA, we have done a lot of activities through the data collection, which have been submitted to council. This is the department of the government, where we are now with our own strategies, which we are doing locally led adaptation. And this locally led adaptation program, what we've basically done, we have talked to our local cities where they have been given a land, which we identified this land was a dumping site. And being a dumping site, we managed to discuss with them because of the data which we collected. And fruitfully, we have a green space which was constructed where we are doing local adaptation activities within our community towards the VCA. And this is what we are doing in our community because of lack of sanitation, water, and floods, which always affects us. And also our communities are prone to diarrheal diseases, more like a lot of diarrheal diseases which we usually face. We have managed to come to using local-led adaptation. And these green spaces have helped more, especially in our area. It helps in the area of our communities within our communities because we are always facing floods, and these floods which we face, it has been critical, especially in the area of climate change, where we don't have where to go, but we still remain in the same communities. Through the data which we collected, council gave us land. It's a small portion, and it was not the land which council really know, but because of the data collection, it has made us easy to allocate that place. Council came in to come and see the place, which was now a dumping place, and it was changed now to become a green space. This green space, which was constructed through the women under the VCA program, it has really helped and changed our lives, because whatever we are doing there is locally led adaptation. These green spaces, we started by planting trees. These trees we are planting, we are just nearby the connection of water in the whole community, and it is also helping to recharge the water, which supplies the whole Kanyama. So with the plants which we plant there, it's beneficial because even our lives have been helped through these plants which we plant at the green spaces. And also, not only that, the waste, which is also a critical issue in our communities. We are doing it in a small scale, but we are trying by all means to see that this waste collected, it becomes a source for us where we are making organic manure. We have also come up with a component which we do urban agriculture, and also black soldier flies. These are locally led adaptation using waste collected within the community, we utilize that waste, and we make that waste to become wealthy for us. And what we are doing within our communities, we are promoting to plant gardening. Women all over our communities, they are planting different types of vegetables within their communities to fight poverty at household level. not only fighting poverty, even it helps them to save so that they can get a small amount of money and save and also take their children to school. So within the VCA, the program for VCA, in Kanyama, we are locally doing everything from the grassroots, which is the local-led adaptation. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice, for this great example of locally led adaptation. I would now like to give the floor to Nigel Topping to do some closing remarks. We will not stop there, actually. We will then go back to Paulo and give some final remarks, but Nigel needs to leave. So please, Nigel, if you can take the floor.
Well, first of all, thank you to David and all of the speakers who shared the different regional perspectives. You know, one of my proudest achievements in the 3 years I was a high-level champion was not just the launch of the Race to Resilience, but to be part of, a small part of, but seeing the Resilience Hub come to life and really full of life. It feels to me like it's one of the most full of life parts of every COP now, and I love the fact that the regional hubs are part of that network. It seems a very good analogy for what I hear very loud and strong from all of you, this need to keep dynamically connecting local and global, you know, and making sure that there's a two-way flow of respectful information exchange and problem solving, and not in one direction only. So that democratization of power and of processes is one of the loudest messages, which comes out beautifully from all of you. And the second message, of course, is about finance, and it's very interesting what you're all saying about finance, because there's a real there's a real consistency in the need to find ways to direct finance to locally led solutions. That seems to be one part of the message, and then there's just a need for more finance for adaptation and for loss and damage and possibly new sources, and I want to come back to that. And then the thing that I wanted to just reflect on a little bit is that part of the challenge when we come to things like COPs is that almost by definition, anything that's international tends to be really quite abstract. So it's quite geeky. It can be very boring to non-experts. In fact, we use a whole lot of language which is meaningless to non-experts, like loss and damage, adaptation and resilience. These are not phrases which you use in ordinary speech. So we don't just have the need to translate into all the different languages that communities are living in, but we also need to translate between the abstract language of international climate diplomacy to the pragmatic language of lived experience. So I think that for me, when the conversation about adaptation and resilience really comes to life, it's when we hear stories like Fahim's, your story of the convening young people, and just the network effect of that, then creating an asset which was deployable in a time of crisis. Or Alice, I mean, you were listing one practical example after another about community data collection informing a higher level government decision-making process, practical solutions of turning waste into resources. And it reminds me a little bit of what I think President Ruto did really well in the African Climate Leadership Summit, was to flip the narrative a little bit. And I just encourage you all to think about this, is when do you want to be telling a story which is about negotiations, like we need to fix the COP? And when do you want to tell a story which is about trying to bring more people into a story of solidarity, of resourcefulness, of creativity, of empowered fellow human citizens on this planet together, rolling up their sleeves to solve problems? So I think that it's very hard to enroll people into abstract conversations unless it's brought to life with those beautiful examples that many of you have shared. So thank you for sharing all those examples. I'm really looking forward to the time that I'll spend in the Resilience Hub in Dubai, and knowing that it's part of this amazing network of regional resilience hubs, which themselves are hubs within an amazing network of local communities in all their beautiful diversity is something that continues to inspire me to do everything that I can to help be a small part of the solution. So I want David and all the speakers, thank you so much for all of your wise words today, but also all of the incredibly hard work you're doing in convening and spreading and growing the movement all around the world. I'm sorry I have to drop off, and I wish you all well and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigel, from the High Level Champions. It's been great to have you. And before we do a closing of the session, earlier today we had Paulo, who couldn't open his mic. He's here now, so please, Paulo, you can step in with a short message that you want to share, which will be translated by Paz, as he will be speaking in Portuguese. Please go ahead.
Olá, buenos dias. I'm sorry I don't speak English so good, but I speak in Portuguese and it makes the translating. Primeiro, queria trazer que hoje falo pelas vozes de muitas juventudes. Juventude da Amazônia, juventude de Brasil. Tenemos un cenário muy triste y muy desastroso en la Amazônia nos últimos meses e dias. Nossas casas estão queimando, nossas pessoas estão respirando fumaça, nossos rios estão secando e tudo isso acontecendo por conta da crise climática. A crise climática que afeta vidas de muitas pessoas por todo o mundo, pero afeta a vida de muitas pessoas que estão em situações de vulnerabilidade. Pessoas da Amazônia, pessoas mais pobres, mulheres, jovens, e outras minorias que precisam cada vez mais ocupar espaços de tomada de decisões. A COP28 acontece daqui a poucos dias em Dubai e queremos entender e saber o que de fato sairá de negociações da COP28. Duas possibilidades de negociações. Uma é que tomadores de decisões estejam cada vez mais comprometidos e ambiciosos para agir contra a crise climática. Duas, tomadores de decisão que estejam cada vez mais alienados com o sistema colonial e com o capitalismo, colocando a ganância em primeiro lugar. Durante a cúpula da Amazônia, eu e outros jovens reunimos com Fred e conversamos sobre questões importantes para as juventudes amazônicas, tanto para a COP28 quanto para a COP30 em Brasil, e colocamos que a necessidade de nos colocarmos nesse debate. Debate esse que não tem eficácia se não colocarmos povos da Amazônia, povos indígenas, mulheres e outras comunidades tradicionais dentro do debate. Nós, juventudes e nossos territórios, minha terra, minha casa, temos muitas soluções para a crise climática. Pero precisamos ser ouvidos e levados em consideração e colocados para ocuparmos espaços de tomadas de decisões. Em diversos espaços, tanto internacionais quanto nacionais. Queres traduzir?
Muito obrigado, Paulo. Paz, would you like to step in to give a brief translation of Paulo's intervention?
Yes, of course. Thanks, David. I will translate what Paulo has just shared. He said, first of all, I want to say that I speak in the voice of many youth in Brazil and in the Amazons. We have had a very sad and distressing, distressing scenario in the Amazon in the last month. Our houses are burning, our people is breathing smoke, and our rivers are drying. All of this is because of the climate crisis that affects the lives of the people all over the world, and mainly vulnerable people in the Amazon. And these people in vulnerable situations need to occupy decision-making spaces. At COP28, we see two possibilities of results. One is that decision makers become more and more ambitious, and the other possibility of results is that decision makers become or keep being colonialist and putting money first. We as Amazonian youth have come together to talk and define our priorities for COP28 and COP30. And we feel that the COP should put youth, women, indigenous and traditional communities in the front and in the decision-making spaces. Our territory, my home, my community can offer many solutions, but we must be heard and our voice needs to be in the decision-making process, not only as speakers, but also as people with the possibility of making a change.
Thank you so much, Paz, and thank you so much, Pablo. I think this is a great way to start closing the session. Apologies for running over the time, but I think all the messages we heard today are very important and very relevant to the discussions that will be taking place at COP. And I would just like to give a final introduction to the Resilience Hub that will be taking place at COP, where we hope many of these discussions also resonate across different sessions that will be taking place in the context of the Resilience Hub across different themes, which include arts, antiques, culture and heritage, oceans and coastal communities, disaster risk management, and humanitarian action, health and well-being, water and natural ecosystems, infrastructure, energy and transport, cities and urbanization, finance and investment, food and agriculture, and cities and urbanization. Again, sorry. Note that the different leads of the regional resilience hubs, which include the International Center for Climate Change and Development, South North, Fundación Avina, and SDI, who were really key to put together all the engagements that took place across the year in the regional resilience hubs, and have also been actively engaged in the organization of the resilience hub, will be providing oversight and engaging throughout the sessions at the resilience hub. This, for those who will be at COP28, this will be held at the Dubai Expo City. The resilience hub will be in the thematic arena 1, and we hope to see you there during the session. I will be providing the link to register for the Resilience Hub in the chat, but you can also use this QR code to register for the Resilience Hub and get any news and see also the programming of the event. And we welcome you to participate not only in person, but also the Resilience Hub takes place in a hybrid way. So you can also join the sessions online throughout the extension of COP28. So we welcome you to join, and we're happy to continue this engagement and these discussions that started today throughout the next weeks. Thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you all the panelists that participated with us today. And we hope to continue engaging with you in building adaptation and resilience towards achieving global policy objectives on climate. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the end of the week. Thank you.